on yourself. It's one of the smartest things you can do. Go to bankonyourself.com/fearless. Take my advice. All right, Royce White. Erks. All right, welcome back. Let's go to the smartest man in sports, Royce White, and we'll see if we can get his take on Will Smith, Chris Rock, Jada Pinkett, the whole everything we saw last night. I'm trying to give all of our contributors an opportunity about the shot heard round the world. We just heard from Shamika. Royce, what ran through your mind? Let me start here. What do you think of the way Chris Rock handled it? I got to be honest. My initial thoughts were someone walks up and strikes me. I don't think I'm going to have the self-control that Chris Rock had, but that might be because I'm 3 times bigger than Chris Rock, and maybe he's just more self-aware. But yeah. What was your reaction to how Chris Rock handled it?
Well, you thanks for having me back, first of all. I got to just lay this thing out. And, this isn't a little issue. This isn't a joke. This, in fact, might be the issue, right? This is the decay of the West on full display for the entire world to see. That's what we're dealing with here. This is the ancient conflict between men and women and the modern conflict, a crisis of femininity and the crisis of masculinity. And I know many people seem to be having problems defining what a man and woman are. But as a man, myself, this was offensive. I was offended by what Will Smith did. I'm not a pacifist. I'm not one of these people that believes violence is never justified. I've been in my own fair share of skirmishes and scuffles in sports and basketball and things like that, over the years. But as a Christian, I do believe in temperance. And I believe that intemperance has become one of the hallmark characteristics of liberalism and wokeism. To answer your question about Chris, I was very proud of the way he handled himself, all things considered. I didn't think what he said was that joke was in that bad of taste. And let's just be real here. All of these Hollywood figures know that when they sign up to go to these award shows, that there's often going to be a comedian who's the host who will take his shot at them personally in the context of good fun for the show. If you're in the front row or if you're very popular, things of that sort. But let's go back to I want to go back to the physical. Because the physical is what people are trying to draw us away from, the physical order of the universe and of humanity. I have to go here, okay? I know what's trying to be communicated when a man goes to slap another man. He's trying to say, I don't have to exert my full physical force because I don't believe you to be a real threat. And even more so, what he's trying to say, I'm not going to ball up my fist and use my knuckles, which is a more damaging structure. And what he's trying to say even more so is that I don't have to use any more force on you than I would on a woman. And that does draw very distinctual lines between men and women that we've observed culturally throughout history, right? This is why you see it portrayed that a man slaps a woman, a man slaps a man who he doesn't believe is a real man. You see this portrayed or played out in a movie, let's say like Tombstone, where Kurt Russell slaps Billy Bob Thornton, or in Humphrey Bogart in the Maltese Falcon, right? So there is a cultural narrative around what it means when a man slaps another man. It means I'm exerting full, absolute physical dominance over you. For Will Smith, when you go to strike a man and he's completely unexpecting, his hands are behind his back, he bends forward a little bit, his chin is exposed, and he's not looking, and you get the full weight and mechanics and body motion of a right hook, and that man doesn't stumble, he laughs, and actually keeps his wit about him to turn a comedic phrase out of it, you're a bitch. Will Smith was the woman in that situation. And here's why I think that's important to observe. I don't think it was by accident that he acted like a woman in that situation. I don't think that it was a failure of his masculinity so much as it was an embrace of femininity. And that's what we see here in America and in the West, that femininity, the crisis of femininity, has obscured what it means to be a man. He intended to slap Chris Rock the way a woman would slap a man. And the reason why, Jason, and this is the real issue we have to pin down, the reason why is because for him, the natural order is broken. The natural order is God to man to woman and child. In his clan, the natural order is woman to effeminate man and gender fluid children. And it's a breeding ground for neurosis and then psychosis. We're looking at a man whose mental health has deteriorated.
Royce, you've said a mouthful as always, but maybe the biggest mouthful. You have taken, because I think you're dead on accurate. This is why I love having you on the show. You give me things to think about. And so I want you to expound on why you think this incident between Will Smith and Chris Rock, which I think you properly framed. Now go ahead and explain why you think this is a symptom of what's going on in overall America, and this applies not just to Will Smith, but American culture in general.
I think that the intersectional, woke, liberal, neoliberal politics are obscuring what it means to be a man. And really, they're trying to degrade and shame people for what it means to be a man traditionally. And the reason behind that, the strategy behind that is when men lose that traditional sense of masculinity, of primal nature and adherence to the natural and physical order, you're much easier to enslave. That's the reality here. If we can turn men into women, we can enslave the common people with greater ease. And we're seeing that happen across the West right now from this globalist agenda. And I hate to always have to go back to that during my segments, but it is the out in front, blatant agenda that's on the rise and on the move. In Hollywood specifically, here's the kicker. Hollywood is the main promoter of this to obscure gender, traditional sex roles, the natural order. They want the natural order to become an arbitrary sort of social cultural construct that they can bend and leverage against people or use to prop people up whenever they feel necessary at their own whim. And that in and of itself is a heresy against God. For them to be able to define what a man or woman is completely a symptom of atheism and radical anti-God sentiment. And I see that people like Will Smith, who are very invested in how Hollywood views him, that is being run by this neoliberal, feminist, beta male, time's up sort of culture. His emotion in the speech after this incident was the telltale sign of complete mental health, disarray. I mean, I think that he actually believed that it was honorable to get up and defend Jada in that situation in some respect. But he's lost all sense of what it means to be a man and how to defend a woman's honor in a way that's truly masculine and manly. If he really felt that comment or joke was that offensive, and there's some unknown circumstance that he and Jada know, or Jada and Chris may know, and he thought that made that comment uncouth, he should have took him in the back and slapped him. But to do it in front of everybody, to me, is a sign of how a woman scorned, let's say, would go on social media and put out the text messages or screenshots of a man that she's dealing with to expose him and bring herself down in the process. That's not how men conduct themselves. It's a disgrace. That's offensive to real men, how he handled himself. And it's a very poor sign of leadership for the generation of men who are coming up who may look up to him.
Do you think Will Smith is aware that he's just a pawn and a tool in a agenda to fully emasculate men? or is he just buttons are being pressed and he doesn't really know? Because I see a man with a full-blown identity crisis. He was raised with some Christian values. He's gotten involved with a woman that, 20 years ago, whenever they first got together, he's really physically attracted to, and she's talked him out of all of his values. And now he's just at war with himself and has gone haywire. Or do you think he's actually in on the plot and good with the plot and scheme and knows his role and what role he needs to play in order to advance the agenda you're talking about?
Well, I appreciate the framework, because I think an important question of our time, especially for our leaders and people in the public eye, is who's ignorant to it and who's in on it. It's hard for me to tell at this time in our society and with this individual specifically, because I do think he is royalty in Hollywood. He's probably very initiated in certain cultural agendas that even other actors and actresses may not be initiated in. However, I can't in good faith say that he's completely in on it and understands the depth of what a person like Klaus Schwab plans to do from Davos, Switzerland. But I will say this, the net result is the same. And this is where the profundity of Christianity really comes into clarity. When you become a Judeo-Buddhist, Scientologist, wokeist, neoliberal, you're at the behest of the cultural winds. You're an easy target to be pushed and prodded and moved around the board as a pawn. When you have a good Judeo-Christian foundation, it's much harder to manipulate and use you as a pawn. And that's my firm belief. This is Judeo-Buddhism. This is the Kabbalah, the Hollywood Kabbalah, Buddhist, woke, Scientology motif playing out in real time in front of the world. And it's a breeding ground for neurosis and psychosis and suicide and addiction and identity crisis, moral crisis, spiritual crisis, etc.
What do you think of me suggesting Kanye West is going through the exact same thing as Will Smith? And, Kanye just went off the rocker a little earlier because maybe he didn't have the foundation to Will Smith. But, I go back to Kanye, I think it was 2009 with the Taylor Swift thing. And at that time, he's not married to Kim Kardashian. I think he coveted Jay-Z's wife, Beyonce. So he hops on stage to do this big, bold act of love for Beyonce. But what do you think of me analogizing Kanye to Will Smith?
I think it's in a similar vector, let's say. A little bit different. I mean, I think Kanye West is in a crisis. I think many people are in an existential spiritual crisis and struggling with their faith or their lack of faith or their non-faith or their anti-faith. I think Kanye West is on a Christian path and he's on his way home to Jesus Christ. Okay. And that would, to me, be a defining characteristic in the difference of the relationship between him and Kim and what they're going through and the case and claims that he's making about divorce being a sin, of which it is in a Christian sense, and what the implications are for family and the family model. What Will and Jada have done has created some type of, open source, polygamous, Judeo-Buddhist, Scientologist family structure that's gender fluid and so on and so forth. So I think Kanye is closer to being on the mark in the fight that he's in spiritually and his journey back to Jesus Christ and faith. I do see that from the start, Kanye West had a little bit more disanchoring in his natural mental health, let's say, than Will did, right? And he admitted to that, right? He has that sort of bipolar situation going on chemically and things, or from his past experiences in life. So he has the tendency to kind of get manic. So a different type of deal. But we can see Will Smith is devolving into a very similar place over the years. So I think Kanye is coming closer to being home. I think Will Smith is moving out into the deep end. And I wish both of them the best and hope that they find God and faith and help.
I just asked Shamika this. I'm going to ask it to you slightly different, but given what he's done, Will Smith here last night, do you expect the Hollywood crowd to further embrace him, further promote him, allow him to elevate even higher, or do you think there will be a level of scorn directed at him that will diminish his fame and power in Hollywood?
I think it's going to be interesting to watch and see. I'll say that. I would bet that the position of Will and Jada and what the bigger agenda is for idols such as them to move a culture in a certain direction would see him be elevated out of this, to be propped up as a hero, as a defender. And he even started to allude to it in his speech. When he won the award, he talked about being a protector. So he's not an idiot. He was already setting the stage that the narrative is that he was protecting Jada. And I think that there is a neoliberal beta male feminist alliance that would allow that narrative to play out in the broader mainstream media. But in terms of on the in crowd of what his position is internally and behind the scenes, I do see that the Hollywood elites take their award shows and their ceremonies very seriously, and he will be scorned and side-eyed behind closed doors for being disruptive like that in their time of glory.
Royce, at some point, I'm going to need you to visit Nashville because I want to get me, you, Shamika, and Delano in a conversation about black men and black women, because I think there's some real issues here that need to be explored in a serious way in terms of, because the matriarchy is strongest among black women, and it's totally at odds with the true nature of man. That and I want to. I don't want to dirty it up right now by getting some quick thoughts, but I just want you to commit at some point when you tell me, hey, I can make it to Nashville for a day and a half, 2 days. I'm going to try to get Shamika and Delano to come here. And so we can do 2 hours straight on just the black man and the black woman, because you've just described this issue in a much broader sense and, the whole American culture. I would just kind of like to narrow down on what is going on with the black man and the black woman. Our setup, our relationship setup just isn't sustainable. And that's why our divorce rate, child illegitimacy rate are astronomical, because we have gotten away from the natural order. And I'm just wondering how we can repair that. Or, there's only one solution. We got to return to Christian values, but how do we get there? And I would just like to probe those issues.
Can I give us a preface for our 4-person discussion there in Nashville? I'll just say that what is happening is Willie Lynch, How to Make a Slave, played out across time. Whether or not the Willie Lynch letter is historically authentic is not the point. The point is that the cultural narrative or the cultural strategy that is laid out in the Willie Lynch address is a perfect and an almost perfect description of what has happened to the black community over the course of generations. And it's still in effect today. And in fact, it's actually playing out today over and above the expectations, I think, of what Willie Lynch may have envisioned.
Just not to confuse our audience, if you can, 90 seconds, 2 minutes, explain the Willie Lynch letters and just preview a little bit of what you're taught, what's in there that you think is being played out between the black man and black woman.
What Willie Lynch laid out in How to Make a Slave is that in order to ensure that the slaves will remain in their position of servitude and not revolt, is you first have to break the woman's image of the black male. And the way you do that is you take him out, or you take them out and you beat them within an inch of their life. And then you take 2 horses and you tie them to both and you send them in opposite directions and you pull apart. You literally pull apart the black male in front of the black woman. And because her image of the black man is shattered in a way that is deeply rooted in trauma and fear, that she will raise her offspring in reverse roles. She will raise her men to be women and her women to be men. And she will become the ultimate guard dog of the white slave owner. That the white slave owner will no longer have to worry about the revolution of the black male slave, because the black woman will always keep him in check out of fear of losing him, the same way that they did the black male they pulled apart by horse and by beating. And that's what's played out here. We're raising our women to be men and our men to be women. Only what has happened is the brilliance of the strategy is now being played out at a broader scale across race, because again, they've traded in race in the strategy of Nazism, let's say, globalist Nazism. They've traded in the race for class. So now we're going to do the same thing to white men, Asian men, Latino men. We're going to take away the masculinity so we don't have to worry about revolt.
Wow. Great job. Thank you, Royce. Go to youtube.com/Jason Whitlock. Hit the subscribe, hit notifications. Steve Kim, the Korean Cosell, got a hard act to follow. He's got to follow that smoke show from Royce White. Korean Cosell.